Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm annoyed.
By what?
You posted something in our afterthoughts section about how, or in the general comments to the whole site of Bloggingheads.
On the home page, I think we would call it.
The homepage saying that I was absent last week because I had a lame excuse.
That was kind of a joke, but
You said
sorry.
I thought it wasn't a joke. And
Well, do you want to tell us
viewers-
what the story was, Mickey?
Viewers thought it was a lame excuse. You could have said I was on hiatus. In fact, I was having a major surgery to have my hiatus removed.
Your hiatus?
And I'm going to show viewers here that I'm going to show them the scar here.
Mickey, if you show them the scar.
Here you go.
No.
You don't know what I'm showing here.
Well, I hope you're not showing them the real scar, buddy.
Well, we're bringing sexy back here at Bloggingheads. The theme for the day. So anyway, I had a perfectly good reason for being absent last week.
No, I just hope we didn't just see it.
And I really resent that.
I'm sorry.
But there's some good news, too.
What's that?
First, I made Tom DeLay's blog roll.
Really? In a good way?
Sorry?
Oh, the blog roll, the ongoing thing. Excellent. What did you do to deserve that?
He started a blog, and he lists a bunch of blogs that he links to, and I think he actually, I think he actually reads them, because his first post was an attack on the Huffington Post.
Yeah.
Although that could just have been an attempt to get attention in his. But anyway.
Well, I'm not sure what you did to earn his esteem, but so many of the things you've written are candidates for earning Tom DeLay's esteem that it's just it's too hard to narrow it down.
I'm not a huge fan of Tom DeLay's, mainly because all the Republicans I know are scared of him.
The hammer.
All I can say is during welfare reform, he was a good man to have on your side, because unlike everybody else, he rounded up his votes and didn't demand anything. He just had his votes. So they were like, 100 votes that the hammer could deliver, or however many, and you didn't have to negotiate with him. He just delivered them.
That's the kind of guy he is, or was.
Because he agreed with the bill, so...
Yeah, I may bring up welfare reform later in a context that may surprise you. Excuse me.
And the second thing to be happy about...
Yeah, I've got a thing to be happy about.
Okay.
Go ahead, though.
My second thing to be happy about, I know I was all worried last time about how ignorant I was. It turns out I'm too ignorant for Bloggingheads, but I'm not too ignorant to be chair of the House Intelligence Committee. The incoming chair, Sylvester...
You know more than the chair of the House Intelligence Committee?
Sorry?
You know more than he knows?
Well,
you know the difference between a Shiite and a Sunni, for example?
There are things that he doesn't know that I know, yes. Like the thing he got wrong was that he said Al-Qaeda was mostly Shiite, when in fact it's a basically Sunni, anti-Shiite organization under I should stop there.
Maybe he thought there was a Y at the end instead of an E or something. What was the, was this a journalist who asked him?
Yeah, he was ambushed by a journalist. It looked like at 5 o'clock during the cocktail hour. But, and I don't quite, it seems a little unfair, I don't quite...
Maybe so, but remember, they did that, somebody did that to Bush before the first presidential election, and in retrospect, some of us wish that we had heeded the portents.
Well, this was so embarrassing to Reyes that I thought there's this possibility that Pelosi would dump him.
Well, that would be great if it opened the way for Rush Holt, the dark horse candidate for that post, whom David Korn had been pushing on his blog.
Right, I know not Rush Holt. I know he has people on the left who care about voting rights and machine fraud claim persuasively that he has an untenable middle ground position. So it's not clear to me that Rush Holt is the new Jesus. But anyway, I don't think she's going to dump Reyes. So why are you happy?
I taught my last class yesterday, which means I can now devote myself more fully to dispelling the various misconceptions under which you labor, Mickey, so that's good for both of us.
That sounds like a full-time job.
Win-win.
But I believe in intrusive arms control inspections.
Well, see, that just shows you what kind of progress I can make in the course of, like, a year.
I can recite that one in my sleep.
So go ahead, take your best shot.
At what?
I don't know, me. I mean...
No, we wanted to talk about your performance with Instapundit.
Were you among those who was disappointed?
No.
Instapundit, I mean, first of all, if you hadn't been AWOL, we might not have even lined him up. But anyway, he was on. I did a dialogue with him. Are you among the critics? Some of the commenters thought that it was too civil.
It was slightly too civil. But on the other hand, by being civil, you teased out a lot of substance from him.
I thought so, actually.
And I learned a lot. But I thought you did let him off the hook on one. You let your viewers off the hook on one big point, and you let him off the hook on another big point.
I let him off a couple times, maybe. But what were you thinking of?
Well, he makes this objection to your worldview. Your worldview is basically hatred has grown more lethal, so we have to reduce the level of hatred, so that the whatever proportion of people who hate us become terrorists is lower, so that they only destroy one city instead of 3 cities. And his point is, if it's so easy to develop a terrorist weapon that a small group of people can do it, you're never going to reduce the level of hatred low enough to do that, so that your strategy is sort of futile, because eventually New York will blow up. And he said, I have a solution to that. It doesn't involve reducing hatred. And we never found out what his solution was.
He did?
He said that, yes. I can ding-a-link to it.
Ding-a-link to it.
But it's, and I have a feeling his solution is one of 2 things. The solution, which you didn't bother to ask him about, is first that small, sort of empowered packs of individuals will suppress these tiny lethal cells. This is his idea of a pack, not a herd. Mm-hmm. And the second is the one you did discuss later, which is that somehow in the era of greater transparency brought by the Internet, it will be harder for these people to keep their activities secret.
But, as I pointed out, that will probably come at a price of reduced privacy and liberty more broadly, so you'd rather solve the problem by attacking hatred.
Right. I thought that was very good. But if it would work, I would be for it. That's some combination of reducing hatred and compromising privacy. But, if you read Instapundit's book, An Army of Davids, which I happen to have right here, he's pretty pessimistic. In fact, like Jim Pinkerton, he winds up putting us all on spaceships so we can go colonize other planets because we're going to blow up this one.
Yeah, my question to that is always, who is us? I mean, how many people are going to fit on this spaceship? That's why I was nice to him, That's the main reason I was civil. I would like a seat on that spaceship.
Well, I think you may have a better shot than I do at this point. But it's anyway. So anyway, you let him. You didn't grill him and coax everything out of him you could have, and you let him off the hook on his Iraq solution, which is basically, a not completely insane idea that we should have gone around militarily intimidating a whole bunch of other countries instead of staying put in Iraq and getting bogged down in Iraq.
What I didn't say there is if I mean, I did say I don't see how that solves the problem we have of indigenous resistance. What I didn't say is I can imagine that actually exacerbating the problem. Certainly some of the already discontented Shiites in Iraq might not be wildly enthusiastic about us using their country as a platform from which to menace Iran, right?
Right. Plus, Iran is a really big country. If you look at the map, it's about 3 times the size of Iraq.
Yeah.
The idea that we're going to go around toppling all these governments and that the people of these countries have no say in it and they're sort of going to go along and we're not going to buy ourselves more problems than we solve seems very wishful to me.
No, it was, let me, in defense of myself, here, one viewer who calls himself Bloggingheads wrote, unfortunately, apparently as an unhappy side effect of the enhanced civility produced by the Bloggingheads format, the speakers often simply note a disagreement and then retreat, in reference to this very dialogue. In my defense, I had never had a conversation with him before. Actually, in the immediately preceding hour, I had, because we did a whole dialogue, and then it turned out that some switch at his end wasn't flipped, so there was no audio from his end. But aside from that, I didn't know him. The other thing is that I was tired by this point.
Okay. They talk about lame excuses, but
No, but wait, but what I'm going to say is, when you don't know somebody, there's only so assertive and caustic you can be. I mean, the beauty of our relationship is we know each other so well and like each other so much that we can treat each other with complete contempt, you know. But if you don't know somebody, it's hard. A, B. You know, I was trying to keep myself on kind of a tight leash because, as you know, I can get a little emotional about this Iraq War thing, and when I'm talking to somebody who very aggressively promoted it, you know, you never know when I'll just, like, go postal.
Would
So
have been great TV. Those are the moments Bloggingheads viewers treasure.
No, but the other thing is, although we always need to have a few moments of people going completely over the brink and having to be institutionalized for the sake of ratings, it's also true that a promise of this format actually is civil discourse across ideological lines.
I thought basically you fulfilled it, but despite all this Hazara, you could have made your point more forcefully in a still
in
civil
all kinds of ways. And a tribute to our commenters is that a couple of them noted exactly things that I had already wished I had responded more, or responded to at all in retrospect. But I would also say that because we were going through the second time, we had less time. We had explored things in more depth, although not exactly the same things, the first time around. But now we were kind of brushing through.
In the great lost dialogue between you and Instapundit, had he brought up his solution to the problem of small group terrorism?
No, I don't think we'd even gotten on quite that jag to begin with.
Okay, but you know, I don't think his proposal for a greater war in the Middle East removes him from the company of reasonable men. It's also the position of at least one of the bloggers at Iraq the Model, which is a blog I follow mainly because it's guys living in Baghdad reporting what they actually see outside the green zone. But he said, you know, he wanted us. He thought we should have gone on to Iran, and you know, there are probably ways to intimidate Iran that don't involve actually starting a war. You know, I don't know.
Probably are, but they're not as easy as they would have been, you know, very, very early on. But speaking of Iraq,
yes,
should we talk about it more broadly?
Yes.
You got anything to say? Or
yeah, well, it's interesting. I had, you know, I was gravitating, as you were, I think, toward the partition solution as being sort of inevitable because on the grounds that we learned from Yugoslavia that no matter how much you talk about inclusive universalist democracy, if these groups really hate each other, they're going to find ways to kill each other and cleanse each other, and really the best solution is to temporarily let them separate. And that leads to a whole host of policies like instead of encouraging the Sunnis to stay in the communities where they're being chased out by the Shiites, why not, you know, subtly, you know, offer them incentives to leave? Say if you moved back to a Sunni area, we'll give you a house or something. But it turns out that there are at least two other sort of interesting, broad strategies that have sort of been broached recently that I hadn't thought of. One is, you know, Bing West in an article in The Atlantic mentions the possibility of a military coup. I mean, we're building up all these Iraqi army forces. The Iraqi army is apparently very frustrated with the Maliki government. And at some point, Bing West says when they get big enough, there's going to be a coup. And in fact, if you think of that as a choice, as he says, maybe that's why we're building up all these forces and waiting
so that they will stage a coup?
Well, we know that one of the consequences of us building up a giant Iraqi army, well, that it will be take over and brings, you know, if it brings stability, that might not be such a bad solution. I mean, I don't favor it.
It might not, but A, I don't think that's the plan. B, the army is not very cohesive. I mean, half of the units are regionally based and ethnically homogeneous, I think, and I think if I read this correctly in the Iraq Study Group report, and they are reluctant to actually fight on behalf of the national government. So I don't know how they break down by ethnicity, but I don't think you have a united army there.
Well, they wouldn't be fighting on behalf of the national army. They'd be fighting on behalf of themselves.
Well, but the point is they will not be fighting on behalf of any united purpose. They would be fighting within the army. If the next time the army actually does some fighting, I think it'll be among itself.
There'd be some general who said, we have the arms, we're tired of not getting paid. These feckless bureaucrats in Baghdad aren't doing anything.
Yeah.
Let's take over. And that's, you know, an impulse that's happened all over the world.
Oh, could happen.
And
look, you know, all bets are off. Lots of things could happen. A coup could happen. I don't think it's part of Bush's grand plan at this point.
Well, I'm a paranoid, so I thought maybe that...
It's the kind of thing you would think of, and
Well, he wrote, it was an article in the Atlantic, Bob.
Oh, was it?
Yes, I'll link to it.
Claiming that this is Bush's plan?
No, but claiming that our building up, that it is going to happen, and our building up of the Iraqi army opens up this choice for us, and we shouldn't ignore it. That's what he says.
Yeah, but I mean, I just don't see what good it does you. The problem is so much more fundamental than that.
Well,
the problem is, even if you install the ideal leader, suppose you could do a coup completely bloodlessly, what would you do next? What's the plan?
Well, the plan is you have a benign Gene Kirkpatrick authoritarian regime that at least promotes stability and lays the basis for a democracy in 20 years or so.
And is it Shiite or Sunni? At this point, you got to choose. There's a civil war going on.
Was Saddam Shiite or Sunni?
Well, there wasn't a civil war going on then. One of the, in retrospect, underappreciated virtues of his leadership, was that there wasn't a civil war going on.
It's a Saddam-like regime. It's sort of an Alawi-like regime. You have, it's which side is Alawi on? I don't know. The other solution, the problem with this that I see is that the army is not strong enough, and it'll just become a third player in the civil war. So there'll be the Shiite Sunnis in the army, and they'll be fighting 3 or 4 or 5 ways. So that's
They could fight a lot of ways. I mean, what worries me is, every once in a while I go through this kind of regional conflagration checklist where I see how many omens point to the possibility of a truly regional conflagration. In today's New York Times, you've got a story saying that the Saudis have warned the Bush administration that they might well give assistance to Sunnis in the event that, Americans started pulling out and it was Sunni versus Shiite.
Well, we talked about that before, but
right. But there's other stuff going on. Listen, wait a second. The Palestinians are seen to be on the brink of a civil war. They are now actually killing each other.
Right.
Okay, Hamas versus Fatah. You've got in Lebanon could head toward civil war. Now, I will not get into my sermon about how many of these problems are plausibly attributed to initiatives or the lack of initiatives on the part of the Bush administration, but it's looking like a real mess to me. Possibly a very, very big one.
The one thing that stops the civil war, it seems to me, is something we talked about before, which is that the Syrians, while they are controlled by an Alawite clique at the top, are a mainly Sunni nation, and the idea that they are going to ally with Iran, which is a Shiite country, in this grand civil war, seems implausible. So if Syria wants to keep its alliance with Iran, it's going to have to tamp down this civil war. In other words, Syria's on the hot seat. If the Saudis come in on behalf of the Sunnis and fight the Iranians, which side is Syria going to go on? Are they going to side with their traditional de facto allies, Iran, or are they going to side with the religious group that's the majority of their population?
Good question. I don't know. I don't think they have the power to tamp down the civil war really at this point. But but you're right. I mean, there was this Tom Friedman column I think last week where he was arguing more or less for actual withdrawal and saying some interesting things might happen, and one of the things that might happen is that because Syria would naturally side with the Sunnis, notwithstanding their minority Shiite leadership, that is Syria's. And that would end the alliance between Syria and Iran,
right,
which might conceivably have some good consequences. It's not like you can be confident things would play out well, but I think at this point his feeling was, let's shuffle the deck, and you can imagine some good things.
That's a very Rumsfeldian impulse. Let's shuffle the deck, and things will naturally work out in the best way.
Well, yeah, but
what if they don't work out in the best way? What if they result in a nuclear arms race in the Middle East? What if they result in hundreds of thousands of deaths? So what's Tom Friedman going to write? I was wrong again? It seems a very risky strategy.
I don't see any non-risky strategies. I'm not sure that withdrawal is the answer myself, but that was an interesting factor that I hadn't seen in the argument before.
Well, here's a strategy that seems to be the one that the Bush administration is trying, and I think is behind this delay in his address. You know, he was supposed to give a speech before Christmas, and now he's put it off. This idea of what I call the everybody let's gang up on Mookie strategy. Mookie is the American military nickname for Muqtada al-Sadr. And
not Mookie Wilson of the New York Mets. Go ahead.
No, and basically you could get one of the strategies as outlined by Hadley, you pointed out, is to within Parliament shift the majority. So you drop Sadr from the coalition and you add a bunch of moderates, and you keep essentially the key player that makes this work are the anti-Sadr Shiites, which is the Hakim Badr Brigade people who are supported even more strongly affiliated with Iran than Sadr is. If they would join with some Sunnis against Sadr, then Sadr would be isolated. And one way it works is if that results in Maliki being deposed as prime minister and having somebody else come in, you could maybe get the Sadrs out of some of the ministries they control, which seems like a good thing. The second way it might work is if these people give the green light to our military to hammer Sadr, which is what they're itching to do according to Bing West. We really want to go after this guy, and if we get the green light, maybe we can successfully do that. So that seems like and then in the New York Times yesterday they were talking about, well, it's not going to be parliamentary, it's going to be extra parliamentary. I don't see how that works. But it seems to be...
Well, what you described sounds like a triple bank shot to me, but not that there are many things that don't. But
well, it's not a triple bank shot. The only problem, as the Times pointed out, is that Ayatollah Sistani, who has heretofore been a force for stability and peace, doesn't want Shiites fighting Shiites. And this strategy envisions the Badr brigades fighting the Sadr brigades, basically. And and Sistani would look askance on that, and it basically means, telling Sistani, you're an old man, you don't count. Forget it.
The other thing is, part of the Hadley plan, the one that would work within Parliament, was basically to give these parliamentarians a bunch of money in order to become pro-American moderates or something. I'm not sure I see that being a lastingly effective.
But it is sort of an ingenious move, and it seems worth trying. That's my point.
Could be. The Iraq. Did you read the Iraq Study Group report?
Very quickly.
Very quickly. Yeah, that's more or less the way I did.
I read it so quickly that I'm not sure I read the whole thing. I read it on the web, and it was very short and cursory and didn't have a whole lot of backing info. Is there a longer report somewhere that I missed?
It was pretty short. I read the PDF version, and it was 60 pages or something.
Yeah. There must be more. Is that all there is?
I think that's all there is.
Yeah, it's pathetic.
And it seems to me kind of unfortunate that it apparently has met with bipartisan disdain in Washington. And that seems like it's kind of too bad that the Democrats have greeted it that way, because although, look, if you want to look at the strategy for actually extricating us from Iraq, well, of course, that's not going to blow you away. There is no good solution. But, more broadly, the report was an attempt to correct what I consider, and most liberals would consider, some of the, broad-gauged mistakes of the Bush administration in the realm of foreign policy, like this Manichaean worldview where you just deem, certain nations irredeemable and don't talk to them at all, even if you can imagine things that would be in your mutual interest. And, I thought it was a good, broad, philosophical, ideological corrective, and liberals and Democrats should have treated it more nicely.
Well, certainly the idea that we should talk to Iran and Syria seems a sensible one, and has that been ruled as a ridiculous idea? But the question I have...
no, Democrats haven't said that, but the fact that they've rejected it means that it hasn't gotten more valence. Bush is kind of running from the report, which is... it's odd in the sense that, and kind of adds to the air of incompetence surrounding the administration, in the sense that, shortly before the report came out, they made Bob Gates, Secretary of Defense. Everybody knew They knew roughly what was in this report. They knew that Bob Gates signed on to the report. Why would you make the guy Secretary of Defense if it turns out you're completely opposed to the report?
Very interesting point. So you think they're having buyer's remorse about Gates?
I don't know what they're doing, but to me, it's just more evidence that who's on first here. It's just the Keystone cops.
Do we know that we're not talking to Iran and Syria? I mean, that's one of the points that can't you talk to Iran and Syria without sending Jim Baker there to negotiate with the head of state? Can't you
It happens. It happens. It's not characteristic of this administration to open up channels of communication with those particular countries. It happens.
Well, I thought there was sort of right after the war, there was sort of a negotiation
There were
Iran.
overtures, and I mean, Iran was cooperating with us on the Afghanistan issue for sure.
So that didn't involve any high-profile things, so maybe that's going on now. Maybe we've tested the waters and found that there's no deal to be had.
But I think that was reported at the time, at least, the cooperation that was going on during the Afghanistan.
No, you would think if we are negotiating with Iran behind closed doors, that Baker would say the Baker group would have told us that. But I just there's this sort of theater quality to it that may not reflect what's actually going on. That the only way to negotiate with Iran is to send a high-level delegation and have a Nixon-like opening, and that seems excessively, giving excessive weight to appearances.
Could be. Could be time to move on, too.
Could be time to move on.
Perverted justice?
You still think of partition?
Do I still think of partition?
Yeah.
I still think, that's probably the best bet. And the grim, but in some ways convenient news in that regard is that if you talk to people who've been to Iraq recently after, having been gone for 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 months, they say it's a much more ethnically homogeneous set of areas now. In other words, a lot of ethnic cleansing has already happened. I don't know whether enough has happened to make it practical partition. And of course, the preferable way to get there would be what you outlined, the possibility of peaceful population transfer, but you got to really somehow establish order before you can do that. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine a kind of end state other than partition that arrives in the near term and is orderly. But I don't know enough about the current ethnic map to know, how practical that is, honestly.
Okay. I'm happy to leave it there.
So now we are on to perverted justice.
We're on to perverted justice.
Just this article in the New York Times today that was kind of interesting about, there's been a certain amount of vigilante justice in general. There's, these border cops, along the Mexican border, but this was online vigilante justice, and I guess this guy, what's his name, Mr. Von Erck,
right,
gets, kind of like Confederates, if that's the term, but people posing as underage girls to lure guys online into, pursuing them sexually, and then they show up to have the sex, and they get arrested because he notifies the cops.
And they have this lucrative relationship with NBC News, where they then go on to Catch a Predator on Dateline, and NBC pays them for this, although not very much. I mean, they're really selling themselves.
$70,000 per what, year, or
$70,000 per week, per show,
per episode,
per
bus.
That's pathetic. I mean, these guys need an
agent. Oh yeah, we get a lot more than that for our shows.
But they're making millions of dollars for NBC, and they're getting $70,000. We laugh at that in Hollywood.
I have 3 words, Mickey. Sign me up.
That's chump.
Okay,
chump change.
I'm available.
In this town.
But anyway, seriously, did you have a reaction to this whole business?
Yeah, I had a reaction, which is, well, first, obviously, it's going to tend toward entrapment. As they run out of real eager predators, they're going to resort to showing a little more leg, as it were, and attracting more and luring more people to become predators who might not become predators. And it's particularly, with the financial incentives to keep these shows going and, round up some more predators, that incentive is only going to intensify. But my basic problem is our society's whole attitude toward child predators. People who are attracted to young children. I assume that all sexual orientation is in the genes. Homosexuality is in the genes. I think my sexual orientation is in the genes. We've been over this ground. Some people, it's in their genes to be attracted to children. What are these people supposed to do in our society? Are they supposed to kill themselves? Well, anytime they express any thought or take any action, the parents say lock them up and throw away the key.
Well, but you would agree that if they actually act on the impulse and start pursuing underage, and we're not just talking about technically statutory rape. I mean, that's not what you're talking about, right? You're talking about real children. You're not talking about 16, 17-year-olds,
but
right?
These are 13 and 14-year-olds, I think.
Well, I mean, surely you would agree that if they act on the impulse...
No, I agree that if they actually act on the impulse...
Well, these guys are, showing up.
Well, I don't think showing up is enough. That's one
Well,
of the
I mean, I have questions about this. I'm kind of uncomfortable about it. And one question is the following. Is this really the looming peril that parents face in the Internet? Right? Because, I mean, remember, as I understand this, if these guys show up and get arrested, it means that they have already agreed in writing, right, on the web with these supposedly underage girls that they're going to have sex, right? That must be the case, because they don't actually have sex when they get there. They just knock on the door and get arrested. So they must have already said...
What I'm suspicious of. I think our society is so probably rightly hostile to these people that we don't investigate really carefully whether they've actually agreed to have sex or whether maybe they were intending to take the person out for a cup of coffee and pat them on the back.
Well, I can't believe... I mean, there's a couple of interesting things, which is, for one thing, the people are going to meet are not actually children. They're not actually underage, right? So
there's no way you can put
I'm sure the way statutory rape laws were originally written, these must be Internet-specific laws, because I'm sure the way those laws were originally written was the girl had to actually be young, right?
Well, there is a law that they've written that apparently if you show up at a place with the intention of having illicit sex.
Okay,
but that's my point.
Okay, well, that shouldn't be enough. Well, I have a different point, kind of critiquing that as something to really... I'm wondering whether it's worth pursuing that so aggressively that you start raising questions of entrapment. And the reason I wonder is the following. Look, if they've got the evidence in writing when the guy shows up at the door, it means that what's happened, I think, is that the person who's supposedly a young girl has said, yes, let's have sex, come on over. And I'm just saying... that's actually not a big problem for parents, that their daughters will agree online to have sex with some guy they've never seen. There just aren't many daughters that are going to do that. There is a threat that the Internet poses, which is that a guy will say, listen, I can fix your iPod at half the price. Why don't you come over to my garage?
Right,
or listen, I'm a photographer for a modeling agency, or your parents' home, I could take some pictures. In other words, showing up under false pretenses and then victimizing the girl. But if they do that... then you will not have the evidence against them. So that can't be what's going on here. So the real peril that the Internet poses to parents is just cannot be addressed in this way. And the thing that is being addressed, which is, supposedly 13-year-old girls saying to some guy they've never seen, sure, come on over, is just, almost never happens in the real world and is not something to get too stirred up about for that reason, I think.
Right. Good
is
point.
That
well, my point is, do we want these people to live their entire lives just totally repressing their basic impulses until they die? That's one solution. Or do we want to give them any outlet? And it seems to me every outlet we give them, I mean, obviously not going and meeting people, but if they go to sites with simulated child porn, if they go if they write diaries that are pornographic, it seems to me we come down on them like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, but the thing about, I half agree in the sense that I think, if a guy with these impulses can keep, and I don't know if this is true, but if he keeps himself from acting them out in the real world, by indulging in pornography. That in itself may be unobjectionable. But on the other hand, if you look at the pornography, the fact that there's a market for that kind of pornography, which he is sustaining, right? He's sustaining the market for that, and that presumably draws more actually underage girls into that pornography business. That would be the problem with that.
Well, I think they've criminalized even computerized simulations that don't involve actual underage girls. But,
they have?
But
I don't think we want to. I was going to ask you to elaborate, but I'm not sure we really want to.
Basically, things are just tending in that direction. The worst case was a case of a guy who was on parole and wrote a diary entry involving a pornographic fantasy, and he was thrown back in jail for the diary entry. And apparently...
That seems to me truly crazy.
The law was totally against him. It was weird.
The other question is, with these Megan's Law things, what is a convicted, sex offender supposed to do? If there's no neighborhood you can go live in without being ostracized, what are you supposed to do? Now, maybe the answer is these kinds of impulses, in people who have actually committed the crimes, right, with real people, it may be that the impulses tend to be so strong that they are always a real menace. In that case, you should just keep them in jail forever, though.
So you answer one ad from Perverted Justice, you show up, you're greeted by Chris Hansen, you don't do anything, and you get thrown in jail for the rest of your life?
No, I'm talking about people who have actually victimized children. I'm saying, if the laws are going to be written, if these Megan's Law, those laws that notify everyone within miles if one of these guys moves in a neighborhood.
Right, that result in these people basically being hounded from one
to the other. How are they going to live a life after they get out of prison? I'm saying if a recurrence of the crime is so probable as to warrant these Megan's Laws things, maybe you should just keep them in jail. But it does not seem to me tenable to let them out of jail and then create an environment in which they can't possibly exist in a normal fashion.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me we come perilously close to creating a thought crime. And what bothers me is that so many people who are like total civil libertarian liberals, if their parents have no truck with this idea that maybe one could go overboard in penalizing people who have these impulses. Their civil liberty just goes totally out the window when you talk to them at cocktail parties and things. Not you. You're not on Bloggingheads where we have a high tone of civility. But
quite so. Sometimes too much so.
But maybe on Urban Baby. Urban Mom, whatever it is.
Urban Baby.
Whatever that site is.
Urban Baby. It's addictive. Mothers find it addictive, and non-mothers.
Though I think it's pretty perverted, too, sometimes. But,
have you ever been on Urban Baby?
No, but a friend of mine was describing, some mom said, what do I do to have three-way sex or something? And all the other moms were chirping in.
That's the rarity on Urban Baby. I mean, not that I've spent much time there, but...
You seem to know all
there's someone in my household who has intermittently spent some time there.
You seem to know all too much about these predatory techniques. I'll come. I'm a photographer. I'll come over to your house and take some pictures.
Yeah, I always use the iPod one.
Okay, that was suspiciously quirky. Okay, what's next? Oh,
I think Diana or no, Mary Cheney.
No, we're going to talk about.
Well, we're definitely in the gravitas is really leaking out of the show, and I think we're going to steadily descend into ever frothier stuff now.
We're bringing sexy back, Bob.
We really are. This is a heavy sex edition.
This show is a ratings winner. This is Sweep Week.
So Mary Cheney.
Mary Cheney is Dick Cheney's daughter. She's pregnant. She's going to have a child with her longtime partner, and there was a media attempt to gin up a whole debate. Debate over whether she should do this and to get right-wing people to condemn her. Obviously gleefully promoted by the mainstream media to get Christians to condemn the vice president's daughter, a Republican. And I was going to post an item because I had criticized our longtime rival Donnie Deutsch, who's an ad man who runs the...
Yeah, what was that guy? So he was just an ad guy who declared himself like a talk show host?
Yeah, he's a very successful ad guy, although I think his father may have founded the agency. But he's a very successful ad guy who's, really rich, and he has he has a talk show, and it's the crappiest talk show on cable.
Does it worry you that
it becomes a model for blogging heads to shoot for. So he's the next rung up the ladder. If we can beat Donnie Deutsch, we have an overlap between the vlog world and the conventional cable world. And it'll be a huge victory. So he's our enemy. But anyway, completely apart from this, he's impregnated his ex-girlfriend because, hey, she wanted a baby and I sort of wanted a baby. And this is the classic Murphy Brown situation in real life. And he was praised by the New York Post as the expectant dad. Congratulate Donnie Deutsch. He obviously has no intention of actually living with and forming a family with this woman. Maybe he wants to. Let's assume he will financially support this kid and show up at all its soccer games and be a role model for it. And so it seemed to me the interesting thing was who's the worst parent, Donnie Deutsch or Mary Cheney? And I couldn't make up my mind, so I didn't post anything about it.
Well, that seems pretty easy to me.
So I turned to you for guidance.
Donnie Deutsch is worse, but...
Well, why is Donnie Deutsch worse? Because if Donnie Deutsch had...
Because he's not going to invest himself very extensively in the development of the child. He's not going to be around, right?
But I know a lot of single moms with boys, and the father may not be around the house, but he's around. He's available by phone. He shows up. He's a role model. He fulfills those things. I think boys need male role models, and it's not clear that if Mary Cheney should happen to have a boy, that these male role models will be around. And so I think...
So you think boys need male role models?
Sorry?
You think boys need male role models? I mean...
It's an innovative thought, I know.
I mean, well, I'm not even sure. Look, I mean, it may be true that having a male role model makes a boy more like a typical male. But do we really want more males who are like typical males? I mean, given that males are... much more than females, the fundamental problem in the world. They commit most of the crime, the murder, the rape.
Well, yeah,
they probably have more to do with the wars. I mean, no, I'm raising a serious point. I mean, you're kind of assuming...
I'm making a serious point. First, every kid I know wants a father, and they all sort of... They
also want angel food cake,
They desperately want a male figure, and the male figure can tell them things, and the mothers will tell you this. The man in the house can tell them things that the woman can't. And also the man can teach them from the inside how to control their raging antisocial male impulses in a socially acceptable way. And that's really important, as you know.
A good father is a good thing, I'm sure. And if your father is like Sheriff Andy Taylor, that's great. But I mean, it isn't clear to me that a large majority of fathers are especially good fathers. And it isn't clear to me that the average, heterosexual marriage leads to an especially benign environment for child rearing. And it's certainly not clear to me that a large majority of those households does.
Right, but I'm assuming that, let's assume that Donnie Deutsch will be a good role model. That kid has a perfectly good chance of growing up, it seems to be decently. And it seems to be entirely possible that, in fact, Mary Cheney's son, if she has a son, will have to grope and sort of cobble together what to do with his life without the guidance that Donnie Deutsch's kids will have.
That's totally speculative. We just don't have the data because this hasn't happened much. And it seems to me that the a priori case that this is going to be, on balance, a bad thing is just not strong enough to kind of to either condemn it or step in and prevent it. We'll know after another generation of these kinds of things. If we pay attention, we may have some actual statistics.
I agree completely. That's my position, which is let's give it a shot. And if it turns out on balance that it's a social disaster, as some artificial social experiences have been, then we can change it. On the other hand, monogamy itself is an artificial social experiment, so sometimes those things work out. But
I'm not convinced that, again, just because, monogamy is in a sense an experiment.
The position that you're even open to the evidence that in 20 years you'll decide this wasn't a good thing makes you anathema to the gay rights community. That's my point. It's a right. It's a constitutional right, Bob.
Well,
even if it turns out to be a social disaster, it's a constitutional right.
Well, Mickey, it's close to inconceivable to me that it could turn out so badly that I'd want laws preventing it. because we already have parenting situations that are very likely to lead to bad consequences, but it's not illegal. It's not illegal for an alcoholic man to have a family. We don't sterilize them, okay?
Right.
There are all kinds of situations that are much more likely to lead to a bad outcome than two lesbians, having a child, but they're legal.
But the right-wingers who are condemning Mary Cheney don't want to make it, some of them want to make it illegal, and I reject those people, and some of them most of them want to stigmatize it.
Well, I don't think it should be stigmatized. I don't think it should be illegal.
Do you say this is a bad thing? If you say this is a bad thing, then you're outside the PC mainstream.
Well, I didn't say it's a bad thing.
I know, but we're saying in 20 years you're open to the possibility of saying it's a bad thing, and that puts you outside.
I think it's highly, highly unlikely that the results could be so bad. But yeah, if you showed me, that children reared by lesbians have a 1 in 2 chance of becoming mass murderers, I would start wondering about it. I think there's no chance anything remotely like that's going to happen.
But presumably the evidence that would require you to stigmatize it is a lot less than the evidence that would require you to make it illegal. So,
actually, not judging by current social standards, because the truth is, it is not stigmatized for somebody with a drinking problem to have children or to get married. I mean, if anything, people say, "Oh, maybe this will be good for them." Yeah, you should get married.
But maybe we should stigmatize it. But
your call.
The point. I got in an argument with a guy, and I said, I'm for gay marriage, but, and he just walked away at that point. Didn't want to hear the but.
Didn't we already talk about this? Oh, well, we talked about it offline, but I forget who it was.
I don't want to say who it was. It was a prominent journalist. But I do think it's also interesting that Andrew Sullivan concedes that having a mother and father of different sexes is the best way to raise children. But then he says we can't stop them. Well, that's true, but it seems to me the concession is awfully important.
I'm not sure it's the best way to raise children. I'm genuinely not. I mean, look, the deal is, first of all, the fact that it's natural for people to get together and have children does not mean it's conducive to the psychological health for the child, or it will produce children who themselves conduce to social welfare. Natural selection is not designed to maximize either of those things, okay? So even in a natural setting, you wouldn't expect child rearing to always work out in that sense. Moreover, now modern families are in nothing like a natural setting anyway. So I don't really have a high theoretical expectation that children who are products of these so-called normal households, that is heterosexual, will be in especially good shape. Moreover, there's tons of evidence that tons of them are screwed up. So I just don't have the expectation that being the child of two gay people will be on balance a worse thing for a kid. I don't know. I'd like to see.
I don't have that expectation either. All I'd say, I only have the caution that comes from the horrible experiment in permissive child rearing. I mean, there's the idea of people like Tom Wolfe is in the 60s we started tinkering and throwing all sorts of old bourgeois conventions out the window that had worked, and now we're in the process of the great relearning that really there was a rationale behind them. And the obvious one is permissive child rearing, which is, if you know a kid who's brought up by permissive parents, that kid is probably a monster. And the kids brought up by strict parents tend to be better kids. So the idea that you can just let the child do what it wants is an example of something that seemed good at the time that turned out to not work. I'm just open to the possibility, chastened by this experience, that gay marriage will turn out to be another one. I can't see how it would happen. I think it's probably likely to be a good thing. It's probably likely to reinforce the value of marriage and encourage heterosexual marriage too. But I'm just open to the possibility that it won't work. And even by saying that, I'm outside the gay rights mainstream.
Well,
anyway, that's
I'm sorry to hear that.
And and it's also true that if all you're worried about is the signal it sends to to poor single mothers growing up in straitened circumstances, or potential single mothers, then obviously Deutsch is the worst example, because he's telling all the players in the community that they can go on being players and still be,
Yeah.
And still.
I mean, my
still
feeling
have
about
children.
that is, two consenting adults can reach any arrangement they want, and if the woman wants to reach that arrangement, fine, and it's better that she do it with a rich guy like him, I guess. But the only thing that drives me kind of nuts is when guys talk women into these kinds of deals. In other words, going ahead and having children but not getting married on the basis of the argument that marriage is this reactionary institution, and so the progressive thing to do is like dispense with marriage because, in many ways, marriage protects the interests of the woman, and that's just like a con job.
Well, it's also celebrated in the culture. I mean, not only Donny Deutsch, hey, congrats, Donny Deutsch, expectant dad, but look at, P. Diddy, and, he's having twins with this woman, Kim Porter. Do we think he's faithful to Kim Porter? Is he married to Kim Porter? Actually, he might be married to Kim Porter, but I don't think
That's
they
an
have a traditional
important
marriage.
important question, especially since your speculations about his fidelity seem to be pretty theoretical.
We had a well-publicized romance with Jennifer Lopez while Kim Porter was sort of waiting in the wings. So,
again, your superior knowledge of the gossip world has come in handy, and I think it can do so in the next segment.
Okay.
You wanted to talk about Princess Diana?
For
reasons that were initially obscure to me, but I think I now have a theory as to why this fascinates you. Why don't you tell us what your claim is?
Mike, I'm not claiming. I'm speculating, Bob. The story may die when the Brits release their official Scotland Yard report on Thursday noon their time, which would be, early morning East Coast time, basically, there were all these reports in the British papers that the official Scotland Yard report of Diana's death is going to say it wasn't foul play, it was an accident, but she was bugged by some U.S. intelligence service. And this Drudge splashed this all over his website, although it suspiciously disappeared recently. This would be a bugging that occurred during the Clinton administration. One report said she was bugged because of her relationship with Ted Forstman, who is a Republican sort of swashbuckling deal maker who's very interested in education policy. And what was the Clinton administration doing bugging Diana and Ted Forstman? If that was true, and the Brit papers are very unreliable and may well not be true. In fact, I would wager that it's not true. But if that's not, I also wouldn't put it past Clinton to bug Ted Forstman and Diana. So everybody was looking around for what possible national security threat does Ted Forstman pose, et cetera, et cetera. The answer is he doesn't. But at the time, according to Diana's butler and gossip I've heard, he was rumored to be an up-and-coming Republican potential candidate. And apparently, according to the butler, Diana thought she was going to be First Lady of the United States by marrying Ted Forstman. He would run for president as a sort of a Perot-like candidate who wasn't crazy. It seems to me Diana was such a megastar that if you were Bill Clinton, you would actually be worried about that. And you might want to listen in and see if that was going to happen.
She would call the National Security Agency and get them to bug them?
I don't know.
Mickey, here's the thing.
How did he get the national security? How did he get us to bomb that pharmaceutical factory in the Sudan at the height of Monica Gate? There are ways of wheedling these agencies into doing your will, as George Bush wheedled them into saying that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction.
That's a little more straightforward. The thing I like about this topic is that it leads us back to the endlessly fascinating subject of your psychopathology. When I saw that you wanted to talk about this Diana thing, I was like, why would Mickey care about this? And then I read your blog item, and I thought, oh, he thinks Bill Clinton might be to blame for this. It's a scandal that could be bad for Bill and Hillary.
Well, bad for Hillary.
And you've done this before. First of all, what's the name of that guy, Burkle, that you said this was going to be a huge thing, was it was going to blow away the Clintons or something, that, and nobody's heard of it since then? And you spent God knows how much space in your blog on this thing.
The night is young. The campaign hasn't
The night is young.
Yet.
When did you first start writing about this Burkle scandal, the steadily escalating Burkle scandal?
I'm extraordinarily ahead of the curve, Bob.
This would be prescient indeed, Mickey. Because by all appearances, the thing has totally died.
I bet if Hillary runs, Burkle will become an issue.
Well, let me tell you why.
And if Hillary runs, and Bill Clinton tapped Ted Forstman's phone, that would be an issue too. because it gets into all of Hillary's sort of, that she's a totalitarian.
Mickey, I agree that if Clinton used the NSA to, tap somebody's phone for the, to advance the political future of his wife, it would be a story. And it could even be that that's true. That's not even quite what I'm arguing here. What I'm arguing is that your obsession with these kinds of highly speculative theories is strange only because you continue to claim that you're not a conservative, right? I mean, it's fine, if you're just a professed Republican, conservative, you're into gossip, something that possibly could be bad for Clinton catches your eye, and you spend, days of your blog on it.
Well,
that would be fine. But you keep claiming...
What's your... Bob, I voted for Clinton twice.
That's my point. That's what's so weird about this. If there's any... You claim that it isn't... You claim that it isn't that you don't like Democrats. It isn't that you don't like liberals. It's all... You want to just save them from their worst ideological instincts and steer them back to the healthy centrism that will be good for America and good for the party. But if that were the case, Bill Clinton is the last guy you would be picking on. He realized your lifelong dream of welfare reform, Mickey.
If you found out, I'm glad you got that in. If you found out that Clinton was doing something illegal, or you're supposed to suppress it because, hey, Clinton's a good centrist, and so one just doesn't go where the truth leads.
My point, Mickey, is you're never out on front.
I used to be like that, Bob. I'm not like that anymore. Before Clinton took office, I thought, gee, he's so sexually promiscuous that maybe one day this is going to get him into trouble, and that's going to affect public policy. And everybody thought, you're crazy. Why do you undermine Bill Clinton? This is irresponsible gossip. And then it became public and undermined his public policy. So that part was prescient. People who suspected that, gee, maybe there's some sex scandal involved with Clinton. And they were all ridiculed by people like you who said, no.
That is absolutely not true. That is absolutely not true. If I show you the stuff I wrote, you would find out that you're kind of the opposite of correct on that.
About you particularly, but people like you.
Oh, people like me. Well, let's do keep that clear.
By people like you, I would name my friend John Alter as one of them.
So people like me except in the respect that we're discussing right now. I see what you mean.
What did you write about Clinton that was so critical?
I expressed some of the concerns you're expressing now.
Good. When did you stop being a journalist and start being a...
No, Mickey, that's not my point. My point is...
toe-the-line person?
My point is, I mean, look, that was you call yourself prescient? Everyone was talking about that. Everyone was wondering whether his sex life would get him into trouble. I mean, give me a break. That was totally standard Washington discourse at the time, and we were all engaged in it.
I went to the Paula Jones press conference just by accident, and expected also to people to write about this woman who claimed she was sexually harassed by Clinton. Nobody wrote about it. The Post wouldn't let Isikoff write about it. Lloyd Grove wrote a sneering item about another ascent up Mount Bimbo. Nobody took this woman seriously, except the people who were paranoid crazies. That happened. Nobody wrote about it. Then finally Isikoff decided there was a story there and got it into the paper. But
wait, when was Paula Jones? Wasn't his whole sex life already under discussion? What?
It wasn't the conventional wisdom so much that it made it into the mainstream media until Isikoff...
No, but he was already president then.
Well, right, so...
Okay, so Jennifer Flowers had already happened. This was a totally standard speculation. You weren't ahead of any curve.
It was speculation, but there was a lot of... the tapes were doctored, blah, blah, blah.
Well, Mickey, also, that's when the
Jennifer
rules
Flowers
of the press...
is a liar, a bimbo, trailer park trash.
This is so tangential, Mickey. First of all, that was back when the rules of the press were still changing. There had been Gary Hart, But, back in the Kennedy era, the press never mentioned the most thoroughly documented sexual indiscretion of a politician. Rules were changed, so on. But this is my point, Mickey, is that you are on this one, like, way ahead, it seems to me, of reasonable speculation. Why aren't you there on the Republican side? Were you ahead of the curve on the Bush National Guard? Were you out there saying the Bush National Guard story? Saying, yeah, I really think there's a smoking gun here.
No, I wasn't.
No, you weren't, and you never are.
I'm
It's
not sure
always
there
the
was a
Democrats,
smoke. I'm not
which
sure
is
there was a
fine, and
smoking
you'll just
gun.
admit it, Mickey. Just repeat after me. This is going to feel good, believe me. There's going to be a release. You're going to feel liberated. Repeat after me. Just say, I'm a conservative, because you are.
I'm not a conservative.
That's not what I asked you to say.
Anyway, we've been through this, but it seems to be. If I thought that the only hope for humanity was electing Hillary Clinton, and the results would be mass death and slaughter of not electing her, then maybe I would suppress natural curiosity. But I'm not convinced of that, and so it seems to be one of the jobs of bloggers is to speculate where the mainstream media won't speculate. And so I'm
That part's okay.
just doing my job.
That part's okay. They don't even have to do it symmetrically with respect to
No,
parties.
you don't have to do it symmetrically.
But if,
Blogs are not
if the
symmetrical.
asymmetry of their speculation is the opposite of what their professed ideology would imply, there's just something wrong with their professed ideology. It just may not be their actual ideology.
I'm just a perverse self-hater. If I get my rocks off saying nasty things about the party that I support, and David Corn gets his rocks off by finding out nasty things about Republicans, on balance, that balances out. Every blog does not have to be balanced.
That's totally fine. Don't you get it? What I'm saying is that with David, at least it's internally consistent. He says he's a liberal. He acts like a liberal.
Well, but there's self-hating Republicans, too. Look at Chuck Hagel. George Will made his name by trashing Richard Nixon during Watergate. Those were all by and
Yeah, but it's
large
not a
destructive.
lifelong theme of will to trash Republicans and not Democrats. Quite the opposite.
Well, so I'm consistent.
Okay, you win. I lose that argument.
Anyway, how do we get started on this? Oh, Diana. Anyway, the scale's probably dead by the time you watch this. But
I sure hope so.
if not,
I want to specify. I'm not quite saying there couldn't. I'm not saying there couldn't possibly be anything to this. That's not the crux of my argument. Although I got to admit, if Clinton winds up in the slammer over this, I will look a little silly. The dingle-link will live on, I'm afraid.
I think you're probably safe there. But it might, and enough of these scandals, and Hillary might not run. That would be the more likely possibility.
We're already over an hour, Mickey. We should rush through whatever's left.
Okay. Well, I was just going to bring up the reader email who said that I didn't know that the Alawites ran Syria and not the Sunnis. I knew that. Damn it.
You think I didn't know that? I knew that.
Right, exactly. But
What character was that on Saturday Night Live?
it was a Martin Short character called Nathan Thurm. I looked it up. Anyway, but the larger point, which Friedman made later, blah, 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 is that the Alawites might have trouble entering a civil war on behalf of the Shiites when the majority of their constituents are Sunnis. Anyway, over to you.
Yeah, now when I read that Friedman column, I thought, this is vindication for Mickey. You had already written the afterthought, gainsaying that this uppity viewer. And I thought, oh, now he's got Tom Friedman on his side. This uppity viewer is as good as dead. I just want to say, Dingle-Link of the Week has got to go to Nate. I don't know if you've looked at the home page today, Mickey, but that link under where I say Wolf Blitzer never does this.
Right.
Have you clicked on that?
I clicked on it, and it took a long while for anything interesting to develop, so I lost interest.
You are so impatient. It takes like 5 seconds before his head starts getting big. But didn't you think it was great video?
I missed that. I have an incredibly short attention span. I checked out and said, I'll come back to this later.
Now, are you thinking Josh Hammer or Matt Iglesias?
Well, Iglesias' head is always huge. So,
Mickey,
I assume that if it was interesting, if it was innovative, it would have been Hammer.
Mickey, would you remind me to keep you off of TV in the future?
Iglesias has a big head. He's a great guy. There's a lot of brain power in that big head.
My question to you is, which video were you watching?
I clicked some video and there was a couple of blogging heads and nothing happened. And
was I one of them?
What's so exciting about this?
Was I one of them?
I think so, yes.
Well, then it wasn't the one I'm talking about.
Okay, maybe I clicked on the wrong one.
This was Matt and Ross.
Okay.
Okay?
That explains
Do you know the URL? It's bloggingheads.tv.
No, I understand. But
Check out the homepage sometime.
I thought I clicked on the Wolf Blitzer as nothing like this link. I'll go do it right afterwards.
Okay, now Mickey, we got an email into the feedback address. It says, Bob, how about an essay contest and the winner gets to do a dialogue with you, Doug Womble. Mickey, I just wanted to, I'm reluctant to bring this up because, I have to kind of note the fact that he doesn't say anything about you being part of the reward for the winner. And I don't want to lower your self-esteem. So I was reluctant to bring this up.
It takes all kinds, Bob. There are people who are sexual predators, and there are people who just want to
idea of a good time is to do a dialogue with me.
Want a dialogue with you. I mean,
right.
I accept this diversity.
Right.
I'm not threatened by this at all.
Okay, but anyway, you know what would be a good idea? We're not doing this yet. We have to prepare for it and figure out exactly how it'll be done.
A three-way.
What?
A three-way.
Actually, we have that technology. But the whole thing is, we could have a moderator between you and me, but that's MSM. Moderators are boring. So
right.
We're not going to do that kind of three-way, much less the kind you were thinking of. But what would be interesting is to get viewers to submit, like, video op-eds or something, right? Themselves on camera. And the winner of those gets to do a dialogue, like, with you or somebody.
That's a good idea. A conventional idea, but a good idea.
Thank you.
But I think they should
but details to come. Don't start doing your video yet.
I think they should do it with you.
We can argue about that.
Okay.
Anyway, did I mention that the guy who did the Matt Dingablink was Nate? Yes, he deserves that credit. What did I call it? The Dingablink?
You just said something wrong.
Yeah, Dingalink.
Dingalink. Great.
Whoa.
So, sexiest blogging heads ever.
Yeah.
Wait till you see the Scar.
And there's a lot of competition for that title, buddy.
Wait till you see the Scar video.
The what?
The video of me showing my scar.
Oh, please, Mickey. I'm already tempted to just leave this one in the dustbin of history and not even put it on the web. I think that might push me over the edge.
Well, watch it first.
Okay, I'll do that. I think this is the longest one ever.
Cool.
All right. See you next time.